Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first series, the first offering of the Manifesting the Sacred Masculine online course. I'm Mercedes Kirkel, the guide and facilitator for this course, and I am so happy to be here with all of you and diving into this material, which I am really excited about. And because this is the first time I have offered this course, um, I am I'm especially excited because the whole research into it and unfolding of the course has been in process, and it's so alive for me. And I have been really engaged in this process of working with this material. And so now taking it to the next step into offering it as a course and engaging other people with it is very exciting to me. And I'm really looking forward to getting into all this material and hearing your response, hearing your feedback, and growing even more from that. So I am really looking forward to this. So I wanted to start with us just introducing ourselves, saying hello, and then I'm going to go into a little bit around how I got into this material and how it brought me to this place. But let's start with some introductions. So what I'd like to suggest is that you just say your name and where you're located, and what brought you to this course, what your interest is in the masculine, what you're hoping to get out of it, and not too long, just a few sentences, but to give us a feeling for where each person is and what your interest is in this area. So I open and invite you to unmute yourself and begin, whoever would like to start.
My name is Musa. I am from Fairfield, California, and I felt it's the right time for the manifestation of the sacred masculine at this time and age, and with whatever it's going on in our world. For me, it felt just the right time.
Thank you. So happy to have you here with us.
Thank you. I'm happy to.
Good morning, Mercedes and everyone else. My name is Chris. I'm from Oakland, California, and I attended recently the Divine Feminine course that Mercedes taught. I really enjoyed that. So I'm exploring and diving into more fully understanding the energies out there and the energies in here, and I love this opportunity to take this course today as well. So
wonderful. Thank you so much, and I am glad you're here with us too.
Hi, this is Joy. I'm located in right outside of Schuyler, Virginia, Central Virginia. And just finished taking the Light Body Manifestation class, and it seemed like the next step. So, thanks.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Martine, and I'm in Ashland, and I'm enjoying the share place with Mercedes in Ashland. And I'm very excited to be on the course today.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Rajinder, and I wanted to continue. I finished the other course, the Light Body Manifestation, and just wanted to continue and see what it's all about.
Thank you. Welcome. Welcome to everybody. And as I said, there's a couple people who may be joining us next week also who couldn't make this first session. And I'm so happy to have all of you here with me. So let me tell you about my journey of getting here and how this class evolved. And I'm calling up my notes here. First I want to start with just introducing the course formally. So I'm going to go into my slides here. And this is our course and what we're focusing on, manifesting the sacred masculine. And for me, this is both within ourselves, for each of us, whether we're male or female, we all have our inner masculine as well as inner feminine. And it's also about manifesting the sacred masculine in our world. And I heard Musa referencing this too in his check-in and sharing. And this also is a focus of the class, is what does this mean beyond us as individuals in the greater world? So that's what we're looking at over the course of this next 6 weeks. And our focus for today's class is understanding the masculine. This is a picture that I took this year in Florence when I had the great gift of going to see the original statue of David by Michelangelo, which is absolutely breathtaking and such a powerful communication of the masculine. And when I was showing this picture to someone later, they said, oh, maybe you'll use this as the cover for the book on the masculine. It's such a beautiful representation. So I thought, oh, I have to get it in the course at least. So this is for today. So now with that, I'm going to go back to our regular screen sharing and share about my journey and how I got here to be offering this course. Actually, I'm not. I have another thing I want to do first. Before I go into that, because I don't want to influence you in answering this question, I want to ask one more question. In choosing to take this course, focusing on the masculine, my opening question to you is, what does that mean to you? When you think of the masculine, when you hear the term the masculine, what associations do you have with that? What comes up for you? So I invite anyone to unmute yourself and share what your associations are with the masculine. No right or wrong to this at all.
Mercedes, when I think of the sacred masculine, I think of a grounding type energy, that is there to both support others in health and in guidance, but to be kind of a foundation in order to both be there and be present, but also in love and support.
Thank you very much. What other associations do people have, either with the term just the masculine or sacred masculine, either one?
This is Joy. So mine is similar with a slightly different slant. It's more of a container, like holding, I'm trying to think of a good way to put it. It's just sort of the container for, internally for me, that energy is more of a container energy. Yeah.
Thank you. What other associations come up for you? And you can share more than once if new things come up that you feel moved to share.
Hi, this is Rajinder. When I think of the masculine, I think of physical strength, intellectual, intellectual kind of thing. And then when I think of the divine masculine, I think of consciousness, wisdom, kind of like that.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, something that came up to me too as everyone else was talking is that I guess there's a part that thinks of it like an archetypal, if you go back to kind of ancestral roots, like tribal leaders, that, there's the masculine, which could be the hunters and gatherers, that are often willing to take more risk to go out and travel and explore further and kind of push the boundaries, and also about providing for the tribe or the community.
Thank you.
Myself, when the word masculine is thought of, it represents to me the mental aspect of existence. And with whatever earthly and grounding and forward movement related to the mental. And with the mental and the masculine throughout the ages had been corrupted in some ways. It's about time to go to the sacred masculine in its own pure manifestation. And to go back a couple minutes, that's what enticed me at the last minute to register for the course last night. I was in kind of blurry situation, but last night it became clear to register at night because of what I just said, to bring that sacredness and that originality or that true, pure face and aspect of that masculine, which been, through the ages has been corrupted.
Thank you so much. I'm very touched by what you said. What it brings up for me is that I think this is really cutting edge work, what we're doing here, looking at the masculine.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I'm saying what I'm saying, and I feel like I'm boiling. Every cell in my body is boiling.
Wow. And what I hear with everybody's bringing up different aspects of what it means to them, the masculine and the sacred masculine, the divine masculine. I resonate with what everybody is saying and feel like they're all different pieces to the puzzle, different inroads. And that I also have a sense that everyone who's showing up for this course, you're holding a part of that puzzle. You are holding this light grid of this cutting edge work just by showing up for this course, just by being interested in this, just by willing to open yourself to possibly new ideas, new concepts, or strengthening what's already there within you, that you're contributing to something very new emerging in our world and in our consciousness. And that's really exciting to me. Anything else anyone wants to add about associations that come up for you that hasn't been given voice to yet, about masculine or sacred masculine?
One other thing that came up is just that it feels like, through each one of us, we're on our own journey. And one of the role models that to me pops up as an example of the sacred masculine is Siddhartha on his journey to become the Buddha. So to me, that's something I can connect with, going through struggles and, with a goal in mind, even though it might be vague. It's this enlightenment concept. So.
Yes, thank you. And this is one of the things I found in my research and studying about the sacred masculine, that I think the masculine, and men in particular, as tending to manifest in the masculine more than women tending to, as a generalization, really relates to archetypes, myths, figures, stories. This summer, I was reading a book. One of my books that I was reading as research for this. And I hadn't related to it as much as I was hoping to. And then I heard from another man who had just read it and who was so excited about it. And I said, tell me, what was it that excited you about this? And he said, I love the stories. There were so many stories and images of different aspects of the masculine. And I just felt that so strongly. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. That didn't do much for me, the story aspect of it. And I could see it affected him in a whole different way. It had really connected and energized and inspired and strengthened him. And I was like, wow, I didn't have that experience at all when I read it. And it was part of my growth curve of, I think that's one of the differences, that men really relate to stories and images. One person said to me, yeah, it's like coming home from the hunt and telling the stories of the hunt, or holding the stories of the tribe and, telling the lineage and all of that. It's through story. And that was a new concept for me, among many new concepts that I encountered in my research.
If I may say something, just came strongly to me. One aspect of the masculine is leading the way. And throughout history and eons, the masculine, with its corruption, it's been leading from the ego. And it's about time for the masculine to lead from the heart.
I love that. And we will be talking about that a lot. So that is wonderful. And part of what we'll be talking about is the spectrum of the masculine, and seeing the masculine as a spectrum of how it has sort of instinctively manifested in our history and, what's evolved culturally and both individually and as a group for humans, but also what the potential is, where it can go and into the sacred. So we'll be very much talking about that.
And if for me there is something I'm desiring from this webinar, is what I just said, for the masculine in me to rise and lead from the heart.
May it be so.
Thank you.
So anything else anyone wants to share about this before we move on? Okay, then what I'm going to go is back to my slides. So give me a moment to get my slides up here. And there's beautiful David again, leading the way. And one thing I just want to clarify, and then I will start with the history, is part of masculine and feminine for me when I'm talking about this, and also very much for my guides, which is who's guiding me, my guides of Mary Magdalene and Yeshua in particular in this process. When they speak and when I speak about the masculine and feminine, I want to be really clear that I'm not talking about gender. I'm not talking about men and women. Masculine and feminine is our inner qualities. You could say the archetypes, the essence of the masculine and feminine, first and foremost within all of us, but then also as it's manifest in us, you know, in individuals, in groups, and all of that. And I think one of the easiest ways to explain it is it's like the yin-yang principle. That, you know, we all have yin, we all have yang. And I would say it's accurate that most women are manifesting more from their feminine. Most men are manifesting more from their masculine. But there are lots, that's a huge generalization. There are lots of variations and differences amongst all of us. And it's also not black and white because we all do have our masculine and feminine. So it's any of us can be coming from the masculine or the feminine, which is why this is valuable for both men and women, I believe. And at any moment we can be, you know, in flux as far as how much we're coming from our masculine in a particular moment or how much in our feminine. And it's not a static thing or a fixed thing. It's something that, you know, can shift and change and we can draw upon. But in this particular course, we'll be especially focusing on the masculine element as opposed to the feminine element. Any questions about that before we go on, about the difference between gender and masculine and feminine? Because that's, I think, really, really important. Okay, great. So let's go on, and now I will get into the story and the history. And this whole thing began with the teaching that came through me that was channeled from Mary Magdalene and then is recorded in the book, Mary Magdalene Beckons. And essentially that book is spiritual guidance about our spiritual growth, and especially our growth into the next dimension, what she calls the fourth dimension. So she's giving very specific instruction because her great passion is to help us in our spiritual growth. And that's what these messages were really focused on. So I want to talk a little bit about what that means, because not everyone is as familiar with the fourth dimension. And also different people who are talking about the dimensions can mean different things. Sometimes, you know, everyone has their own map, and so they can use labels, and what someone else calls the fourth dimension might be different than what I'm calling the fourth dimension. We might be using the term differently. So I want to clarify, when I say the fourth dimension, here's what I'm talking about. That it's what I would call the etheric astral plane, as opposed to the third dimension being based in the physical primarily. We also have access to other realms of being in the third dimension. We're aware of our emotions, we're aware of our energy, we're aware of our mind or the mental and the spiritual. But our biggest kind of base of being in the third dimension is physical. We're physically based. When we move into the fourth dimension, we're less physically based. We're more based in the etheric astral. And what that means is etheric is energy, astral is mind or mental. So it's kind of like the energetic mental realm. And I think one of the easiest ways to relate to it is it's similar to what we experience when we go into the dream world, where it's got this more dreamlike quality, this, you know, filmy quality. It's not like really tangible the way the physical world is, where we feel like this is really real. We're here in the physical, we can feel it, you know, that sense of being really manifested. It's much more fluid and movable, mutable in that dream world. Also, because it's etheric, the emotional aspect and the sexual aspect are much more predominant in the fourth dimension. And it has to do with kind of like, if you thought of us as being like an onion, the physical is like the outer layer of the onion that we're experiencing in the third dimension, and kind of what's holding us here, you know, the primary thing grounding us in the third dimension. If we peel away that layer, like peeling away the outer layer of an onion, and let go of the physical, or there's still a physical component in the fourth dimension, but it's much, much less. So if we peel it back mostly, largely, then the other ones come forward more. And what comes forward first is this etheric, emotional, energetic realm, kind of like how dreams can be very emotional. They can be scary, we can have nightmares, they can be blissful, we can have these ecstatic dreams. So for many of us, we sometimes feel our emotions more strongly in dreams, and we can wake up and be really affected by that. And we're also, it's not just energetic, we also have the mind. So they're both at play. And our primary learning in the fourth dimension is about manifestation, about how to manifest what we want. And so that can be done in a mental way. There are mental approaches to manifestation, you know, intending through your mind, visualizing, those kinds of things, getting rid of the wrong things that you don't want to be manifesting in your mind, all those kinds of approaches. There are also very emotional approaches to manifestation. And in the fourth dimension, that's our learning. We're learning how to manifest what we want through the emotions and the mind, both together. So that's a very simple introduction to the fourth dimension that I think is, I hope is helpful in terms of what Mary was presenting in Mary Magdalene Beckens, as this is where we're headed. Relative to that, what she said, I keep moving this because I don't want it to be blocking the images. What she said was that part of what is going to allow us to make this shift into the fourth dimension is all about the masculine and feminine. That it's kind of like the gateway of moving into the fourth dimension, is completing our work, and a very particular work relative to the masculine and feminine. And this is what she said about that, that there are 3 stages. The first stage is coming into balance between the masculine and feminine. And the second stage, once we've achieved balance, where they're, you know, in balance with each other, is then harmonizing between the masculine and the feminine. And then the third stage is, oops, here we go. The third stage is uniting the masculine and feminine. So 3 stages: balance, then harmony, then union. And what she said is, when she gave the teaching of Mary Magdalene Beckens, she said, right now we're really working on balance, the first one. Most people and us as humanity in general, because we're coming from this place of being very out of balance, where the masculine has predominated and the feminine has largely been suppressed. And again, this is not just culturally like what's happened between, you know, groups of men, groups of women, or any individual man and woman, but also within ourselves, that we have culturally developed our masculine to a very strong degree. And for most of us, we are way underdeveloped in our feminine. And so the suppression has been relative to even what the feminine is for each of us as individuals, and that has been so suppressed that it needs to be strengthened. So that's where she went, was that the important work here was about strengthening the feminine. And how do we do that? And so that was a big focus in Mary Magdalene Beckens. And she said that there were different ways of doing that, but the biggest, most important way for most of us was in the emotional realm. And this also has to do with the fourth dimension being an emotional realm. So it's part of also preparing us for the fourth dimension. But she said, just in terms of bringing us into balance and strengthening the feminine, that the feminine has a lot to do with emotions, and most of us are very suppressed in our emotions, that we've gotten training and programming. And again, this is cultural as far as individual, that emotions are bad, they're dangerous, we shouldn't be emotional. And the training has been different largely for the masculine and feminine. The feminine were trained to somewhat have more access to the emotions as long as they didn't go into anger. For many, the feminine and anger was taboo. If you want to be feminine, never be angry. And for the masculine, it was kind of the flip. It was, if you want to be masculine, never be afraid, never be sad. Sadness is weakness, fear is weakness. If you want to be strong in the masculine, and it was always often expressed as be a man, don't express sadness, don't express fear. Anger's okay if you're in the masculine, but not the feminine. So it was kind of different programming that was given, but in general, there was a lot of programming around try not to be emotional at all. If you really want to be safe, try not to be emotional at all. And this was one of the ways that the feminine has been suppressed. So she was saying that this has really held us back because a lot of our power lies, our feminine power lies in connecting with our emotions. And that there's a particular function that emotions were intended to serve of connecting us with God, our own inner divinity, and connecting with us with our strength through being connected to our divinity in that form. So that was a lot of the teaching that she gave in Mary Magdalene Beckons, was how to do that, a very practical teaching for that. Well, what happened was I published the book. I started working with people in individual sessions, and people would tell me, oh, I just love that teaching in Mary's book. It was so powerful for me. Thank you so much. And then I would ask them to engage it, and I saw that they didn't really know how to do that. And out of that, I had the idea, and Mary was very supportive and in agreement with this, that I should create a course to help people really learn how to implement Mary's teaching around emotions. And so out of that came the Magdalene Heart Path course. So I'm going to turn off the slides for a moment here and go back to sharing with everybody. Give me a moment. I have to, there it is. Okay. So, so what happened when I started teaching this course was a very interesting thing. And at this point, I've been teaching the course for about 5 years and taught it many times to many people. And most of the time, I had women who signed up for the course. Most of the people who I ever hear about who are interested in Mary Magdalene and who have read my books and are interested in my work about Mary Magdalene are women, which is not surprising to me, because in general, in our world, people who are interested in spirituality, and especially what you might call New Age spirituality, channeling, those kinds of things, tend to be women. It's almost every gathering that I've gone to or participated in, the vast majority are women, a small percentage of men. And then out of that big pool of who's interested in spirituality, and especially New Age spirituality, the ones who are interested in Mary Magdalene, out of that tends to be even more women. So it wasn't at all surprising to me that it was largely women who were taking this course. But I did have some men, which I always really valued and appreciated, because I like to hear, and see how it was for a broader base of men and women. And I started to notice that in general, and this was not true with every individual, but in general, I saw a different response between women and men. With women, I saw that initially when they would take the course, lots of times it would be challenging, the concepts, and sometimes to the point where there was an initial depression, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm so disconnected with my feminine. I didn't think I was this disconnected, and kind of an overwhelming feeling, even like, oh, this is too much, this is too hard, how will I ever change? But fortunately, I've had women stick with it through that initial phase and get into what quickly changes into a new phase of excitement and starting to get it. And I would see light bulbs go off and the connections and then the stories about, oh, I applied it in this situation, I applied it in that situation, and I really saw it making a difference. And it was a very, for me, a very rewarding process to see this and how it was making a difference in women's lives. And I really saw the course doing what I was really hoping by creating the course, of empowering the women to make this process their own so they could engage it in themselves and make a difference. And I really saw it happening. With the men, I saw a different thing in general. And again, not with every man, but often enough that I noticed it was a pattern. I noticed that the men were very interested in the material and expressed that. I also noticed that they expressed that it was making changes for them, that they were grateful for it, that they were excited about it. But I didn't see the same demonstration that I was seeing with the women. And oftentimes when I would ask the men, or they would volunteer to, in the midst of the course, to engage some aspect of the process, it seemed like they still weren't quite making the connection, quite able to get it. When I would guide them, they would get it. And I would see that. But on their own, I didn't see it the same way, where I saw the women just taking off and really getting empowered and, you know, having so much to say about that. And so after years of teaching this and seeing this more and more emerge as a pattern, I finally, this spring, I asked Mary, I said, is this not a men's path? Is this really only a women's path? Is there a different path for men? And she said, yes. And I was so surprised. I thought she was going to say, no, men need this too. You know, they're just like, you know, need help more or whatever. But she said, no, there's a different path for men. I was like, wow. And then I said, okay, what is it? And she said, well, we want you to research it, and we'll comment on your research. And the we was she and Yeshua were in concert working together. And I was like, okay. So I had my assignment if I chose to accept. And I started the research. Well, I started on the internet and also through books, through articles, anything I could get my hands on. And I started looking up sacred masculine, because when I was working with the material that Mary Magdalene gave me, I found that it was very much around, connected to the topic that was often referred to as the divine feminine. So I thought, okay, I'm going to look up divine masculine. I looked up divine masculine and found like nothing out there about divine masculine. Then I thought, okay, sacred masculine. I'll look up sacred masculine. I looked up sacred masculine, found almost nothing. This was my lesson number 1. The masculine does not seem to relate to these terms in general of sacred masculine, divine masculine. Whereas I find for the feminine, this is very attractive. This is, you say these words and it sparks something for the feminine. It's not the same for the masculine. It's not their inroad in general of what really excites them. And I have a story about this that was another insight for me along the way. And this goes back to when I was in Austin, Texas, and I was attending a singles group there that was called Spiritual Singles of Austin. And it was like your general spiritual gathering. It was about 4/5 women and 1/5 men. And which is always very disappointing to the women. They want more men there. And the leader of this group was a woman. And at one point she came over to our table, and there were a couple of men at our table, and one of them was very outgoing. And so she asked him a question that seemed to be on her mind. And she said, how can we get more men to attend this gathering? And without a moment's hesitation, he said, drop the word spiritual. And I was like, wow. And that was another one of these, that's not attractive to men, where it's really attractive to women. So then I started asking, okay, what is attractive to men? What are men thinking about when, if it's not sacred masculine, divine masculine, where's their focus? What are they being drawn to in terms of growth, in terms of, where are we going? Where are we headed? Evolution. What is it that they focus on? So I started expanding my parameters, trying to figure out, and I started to connect them with new things. When I got into growth, men's growth, and that kind of thing, then it started opening up for me more. I still did not find as much as I thought I would. But I started to find some things at that point. And let's see. So one of the things that I found was that there was kind of a progression. And this started to come together for me after a few months, a ways into my research, that I started to see a bigger picture of a progression that had happened relative to the masculine and for many men in terms of what was the men's movement, if you could call the spiritual feminine or the divine feminine, the sacred feminine, kind of the women's spiritual movement, what was the counterpart for men? And I started to see a pattern over time. So that's what I would like to show now, and I'm going to call up my slides again. Give me just a moment here. So to begin with, I'm going to move this bar here, or try to move this bar. When you see the slides, do you see the screen sharing at the top?
No, we just see the entire slide page. We don't see the camera's view.
Oh, that's nice to know. Thank you. I always wonder if you're seeing the same thing I'm seeing, and it's a little confusing. Okay, so we're going to start with what I call the post-industrial revolution, and sort of this is the modern history, you might say. And this is, of course, covering a whole lot in like one umbrella category of, like, from the time of, the Industrial Revolution up through, I would say, the 50s. What the men's movement or men's role, or the role of the masculine. And please excuse me, I probably am going to use the term somewhat interchangeably, masculine and men. And in general, if I do it, it's a habit. And so you might need to translate in your mind when I say men that I'm talking about the masculine. But these were the kinds of archetypes of the masculine up through, I would say, the 50s. Of the strong leader, this is Patton here, of, working together. And the Industrial Revolution was, the age of starting to bring in machines, and with that, like, lots of new ideas and bringing the mind in and working, to use ideas and mind and science and research to change our world. And then there was the image of, the strong family man. And if you remember this program, you're as old as I am, which was a picture from Father Knows Best, one of the TV shows I grew up with. So these are just a couple of, snapshots of where we came from in this, longer view. And then came the 60s. And in the 60s, the image of the masculine, the role of the masculine started to change. We started to get the sensitive masculine, the musician, the artist, the masculine coming out in terms of color, self-expression, exploring love, exploring peace, exploring expanding the mind and drugs and other realities. Lots of change for both the feminine and the masculine, but right now we're focusing on the masculine aspect of that and what we went through in that era, what that started to open up. And out of that came the beginning of the women's movement, being a really strong focus in the 70s. And in the 70s, the women came to the fore, and in some ways, the men kind of receded, the masculine, more into the background. And the focus in the women's movement and feminism of the 70s was equality. Social equality, economic equality, starting to address the social structures as a result of patriarchy and women being suppressed socially. And so there was this movement of women finding their voice, women finding their power, women starting to demand change in terms of more equality. And also the new focus on patriarchy, which in the past was just kind of accepted. It was kind of a given. Suddenly, this was being brought into consciousness, that maybe this isn't just the way it is or the way it should be, that maybe this is something that could be changed and could be shifted. And what emerged in the 80s, and since then, I would say we're still in this phase for women, was the goddess movement. And the focus going from the outward expression of, we want equality in an outward way to what's our inner empowerment? And where do we really draw our resources from, our power from? And this was the beginning of looking at, connection to ancient goddess figures, to inner power, to what it means to be the feminine and to express that in life through, all sorts of ways, the way the feminine may express this, to come together as groups of women and connect with this. And what is our inner and our spiritual source, our empowerment? Again, this tended to be more a women's movement. There was a men's movement at this time too, but I would say from my research that most men who are leaders are in agreement that women at this point really were taking the lead, and the feminine, I should say, in some ways, but the feminine manifest largely as women were taking the lead. And it was more women were involved. It was a stronger movement. And some of the men leaders that I've been studying have saying the men are lagging behind, that we're catching up. And I think in some ways this needed to be the process. This is my feeling about it. And it's very much what not only Mary Magdalene has said, but there are many spiritual leaders, of course, many of them women, who are saying about this time that we're in, that this is the time of women coming into leadership and the feminine coming into leadership. And Mary Magdalene has some very interesting things to say about that, which we'll get into later. But historically, this was the beginning of what we're still, I think, very much involved in, of seeing this strengthening of the goddess movement and feminine spirituality. I think this is one of the reasons why, especially New Age spirituality, hasn't spoken as strongly to men, because it's been very much a focus on the feminine aspects of spirituality. And I think right now, this cutting edge we're on, this precipice, is about shifting that and bringing the masculine in. And from my point of view, the much needed masculine. So let me go to my notes, make sure I'm not missing anything here. Give me just a minute. Okay. Oh. Okay. Thank you for your patience with this. This program is a little tricky for me still. So thank you. So the last thing I want to say about this was something that I've really come in contact with through my research on the masculine. And I think this is one of the things that came out of this whole focus on the goddess movement. I think it has been very important for the feminine altogether and women, many women in particular, to find this strengthening within themselves and this connection in the feminine altogether. And I also think there's been some backlash out of it that we have suffered somewhat. And part of the backlash, I think, has been the pendulum going the other way, where for so long in the patriarchal system, there was this dominance of the masculine, not only in terms of that's what we were being fed as, you know, this is the way we should be, men and women alike, being very developed in our masculine, you know, to the exclusion of the feminine, but also that we should do that because it's better. That's the best way to be. And I think the pendulum swinging to the other side in the goddess movement, there was an element of the goddess element, the feminine is superior to the masculine. And I definitely saw that in myself. And I didn't realize it until I started to do this research and really learn more about what is the masculine, and what is the masculine inside me, in men, in the world, and how do I feel about it. And I realized I felt superior. I felt like the feminine was really better, and the masculine and men who were animating the masculine were sort of like a inferior version of the feminine. They would be, you know, it's too bad that they can't feel the way we can. It's too bad that they are, you know, so aggressive and, you know, stuck in their head, you know, they can't get in their heart like the feminine can. I didn't only think this, but I saw that there was an element where I really was prejudiced against the masculine and believed that the feminine was better. I was shocked to uncover this in myself. I did not know that I had this point of view. I'm saying this because I think many women may also have this point of view. I think many men may have experienced this in women, whether you're conscious of it or not, that at some level you may feel that you're being related to as less than, as inferior, and being demanded to become more like a woman in order to be as good as. I would love to hear feedback about this. I would love to hear thoughts about this, experiences you may have about this, how this resonates or doesn't resonate for you. Because this was another one of those big ahas for me in this process, was to start to realize there's been backlash that I personally am aware of, yes, we're coming out of this old way of patriarchy is the best, men are superior, everyone should be like men. And that to some extent, I think we've gone the other direction of women are better, the feminine is better. So I would like to hear thoughts about this, feelings about this, experiences. Anyone want to share about that?
I will. It's Rajinder. My husband grew up in the 50s with this whole concept that, you know, men are strong leaders, strong family man, intellectual. And he said to me, he feels that I treat him, I speak to him like condescendingly, like he experiences that I don't value that part of him. And I'm really grateful that you brought this to the consciousness, because I was thinking like, what is up with that? I don't get that. But when you're saying all this, it really, which is probably the real reason I took this course, to try to understand this a little better. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, just from my personal experience, there are times when I feel with some feminine beings that I need, because I'm not at the same emotional level, that I need to be grown to that level, that I need to be taught to that level, that I need to be actively opened to that level. And that naturally brings up a little bit of resistance in me when it feels like, there's a difference of, perspective. I I feel good, being present, and I ask for, acceptance of, being where I am and who I am. But there's often, a desire to, and this might be, I don't know if it's cultural or, but to want to help when you're like in a relationship, and I'm inferring here from the feminine side that you want to change the person that you're with to be, a better person. And I feel often that too. I believe most often that I'm very accepting, but I catch myself quite frequently, wanting to help somebody else perfect, because personally I feel a strong perfectionist, and that kind of engages both sides of the masculine and feminine egos. When you're at that level of wanting to change the person because of your ego status.
Yeah.
But being able to break through that is something that I'm hoping to learn more on and continue to experience. And I get bits and pieces on how to kind of be at an energetic level. But
Yes.
that's something I want to broaden into much more.
Yes, thank you. And that's what I realized that was going on in me unconsciously. And of course, I teach, so I'm in that teacher role already, oftentimes just professionally, where I'm helping people, but that I was coming from an unconscious place of thinking I was, perfecting people, but it had a bias to it. The bias was the perfection was being more feminine. If only you were more feminine, you'd be more perfect. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share that, just comes up for you around that of?
Yes, this is Musa here. And at certain time in my life, without going through details, I was able, painfully, to merge the masculine and the feminine together. It wasn't easy. And as I am now, it's easy for me to feel the masculine and the feminine and balancing the two aspects and merge them together when I am by myself. But when I go out in the world, when I walk out of my front door, and especially when I get in business and everyday's life versus workshops with spiritual people, I tend to automatically switch to that mode of masculine, archetypal, uh, and also within the family. It's like, this is my role. It's something switches. Different buttons in different situations tend to switch things around. And it's not just get me confused and unbalanced. Also, it makes me feel at pain within. Like, how can I say it? It's like I'm not myself in a way. And there is that old self versus the new self, and it becomes confusing. And then it's like I retire by myself between my four walls, and I feel more comfortable.
Yes. Thank you very much for expressing that. And this is part of strengthening our masculine, I believe, because, and we'll talk about this more as the course unfolds. The masculine part is our protector, and the masculine is the protector of the feminine, one of the roles of the masculine. And that includes our inner masculine protecting our inner feminine. And so when we strengthen our inner masculine in its sacred form, it will protect that part of us that includes the feminine and strengthen our ability to do that more and more, even when others aren't doing that, even when it's not being supported in our environment or culturally, we can still stay connected to that through that strengthening. And that's really a masculine strengthening. So part of my hope is that this course will contribute to strengthening that for you and for everyone, not just you.
And if I may add, when this webinar started, I was holding back, just listening. Just that part of the masculine mental was there, absorbing. But then when I let myself be vulnerable and I spoke first, the divider kind of melted, and I am literally now on high. I am more than just listening. I am feeling, and I am now on high.
So it feels good?
It feels very good. It feels authentic. It feels genuine. And I desire this feeling every second in my life.
I love hearing that. And I love hearing it from a man. Thank you so much. You've made my day. You know, this is the first time I've offered this course. I've been immersed in this material, this research, this constant meditation. And ask people who've been around me, they'll tell you, for 6 months. And I believe in it so much. But to hear, you know, what you just said is like such a testimony to, yes, we're on the right track. Because we don't just need the feminine, we need the masculine. We need the masculine and alive, engaged with the masculine's unique strengths and contributions, and you know, fully involved. And thank you.
It feels the mind is attentive and present, and also the heart is present. And the tears can roll any second without any objection.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's what I was hoping for.
I would like to provide some additional thought, because I really appreciated that was brought up about vulnerability. And I've been exploring that in myself just in the past 2 weeks. I feel that we often have, this cultural idealistic role of who we are as men, as the masculine, to be that strength, to be that protector. But we often have our own flaws, our own vulnerabilities, and it's frightening to be able to open up and be what's the word? To be present, to be sharing, to acknowledge those flaws, those vulnerabilities with others, because there's this inherent sense of responsibility to be this role that we feel as the strong protector, to be there, and it's probably a role-based obligation that we create for ourselves. But I fully believe that there is that gateway to the opening that is through consciously acknowledging our own vulnerabilities, our own weaknesses, and being available to share that breaks down that role concept inside us so that we can be accepted, which is really kind of what we truly desire, is just to be accepted for who we are, not for the role we are. And to be accepted for being vulnerable in our masculinity in any way, but still being lovable, still being loved. That, I feel, is a gateway to open that up. However that works, I don't know, but that's something I've been exploring, and I really appreciated, hearing those thoughts being shared.
Thank you so much. And this, to me, is the perfect segue for where I want to go next, because I actually feel like there's a map for this. And that's what we're going to be following in this course. And I'm so excited about sharing this with you all and going on this journey together, and hopefully leading to this place that will guide us through these different aspects in a way that can support us in integrating all of this and owning all of this and coming out with the real shining sacred masculine for all of us. So I'm going to explain what I mean by that in just a minute. But before I do, I just want to say one more thing, and then I'm going to get into a little bit more explaining about this attitude that the feminine is superior, conscious or unconscious. Part of what happened out of this, remember that slide where I showed the 80s, the goddess movement, and we're kind of been in that for the last 50 years of women's strengthening, women's connecting to source, to their own femininity, to the greater femininity of goddess of the world, and built on the foundation of feminism and finding power and the voice came this demand from many women that men be emotional. And that if you want to be in a relationship with me, I'm a goddess. I champion my feminine nature, and here's what relationship looks like. It's emotional and it has emotional sharing. And if you want to be in relationship with me, you need to be emotional. And I think many men receive this message either directly, indirectly, personally, universally, because there was so much communication about this, whether you got it, from media, from therapists, whatever, that this is the problem with the masculine. You're not in touch with your emotions. And to their credit, I think many, many men listened, heard, and responded to this. And many men started to make changes and explore this. What would it be to be more in touch with their feelings, to be more expressive of their feelings, to be more inclusive and embodying their own feminine? And what happened oftentimes is when they would do this, they would get the feedback from the women embodying the feminine. We don't like you anymore. You're not masculine enough. And I think this left many men very frustrated and confused. Like, we can't win here. We can't be the old style, the patriarchy, John Wayne coming in on his horse to save the day. That's bad, that's out. Okay, we try to be more feminine. We try to express our feelings. We're not attractive anymore. We're not real men now. We can be friends, but, not what women really want and what we really want to, the kind of response we want to experience from the feminine. And what do? What is our path? And I think that was the birth for many men of what's now become a growing men's consciousness movement. And it has a lot to do with going within and asking, what is the masculine? What does it mean to be strong in the masculine? How is it different? How is it my own? How is it unique? How does it play with the feminine? And this is what I found in my research, is that this is what I see going on most of all right now with men's leaders in the men's consciousness movement, with groups that are forming and doing men's consciousness, men's growth work, is that they're doing this inner meditation, focus, consideration, and sharing it and growing and learning together with other men. This is what I found in my research. And in particular, I found that there were themes that I kept running into. And that's what I want to share now, of the kind of consciousness themes that I saw many of these leaders and groups working with. So I'm going to call up my slides again here. Okay. Let's see. And, okay, before I get to this, well, what emerged were these 4 archetypes that, and that there was a book that was written that I don't know how many of you are familiar with this book, but it's a book called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, and it's written by 2 Jungian, well, at least one was a Jungian psychotherapist. I'm not sure. Robert Moore is a Jungian psychotherapist. I'm not sure about Douglas Gillette. Robert Moore's no longer living. But this book came out describing these 4 archetypes of masculinity. And as I was doing my research on different, movements alive today in the men's consciousness world, this was the biggest thing that I saw, was men working with archetypes and stories, and especially these 4 archetypes. Now, some groups relate these as going back to Jung. When I researched, I did not see Jung talking about these. Now, I'm not a Jungian. I'm not trained in Jungian work and history and psychotherapy, so I may be wrong about this, but I did not see Jung actually talking about this. I saw him talking about archetypes. I think it might have been this particular therapist, and maybe others before him, who started distilling down that these were the key archetypes that really spoke to them and to many men as the masculine archetypes. And so I want to talk about each of these and what I learned through my research. So I want to begin with the warrior. And the warrior, these are some of the different images of the warrior that I think bring up the qualities of the warrior. We have the Native American and what that represents for many of us of the warrior quality. There's, martial arts as a form of, engagement of the warrior. And then we had Star Wars and the Jedi as, again, warrior figures. And so this is one of the streams of what the masculine means to many people, especially men that I encountered working with the masculine, is there's this theme of warrior energy, warrior qualities. And so this is one of the things, and next week, this is what we're going to be focusing on. Our whole course next week is going to be around the warrior, and what does it mean to be a warrior? How does that manifest? What does that mean in a spiritual sense? Lots to say about that. The second one was the magician. Now, for me, the term magician didn't immediately speak to me. For me, the term warrior right away brought up exactly, I think, those qualities that many of us, associate with warrior qualities of strength and protection and, what the warrior means for many of us. For me, magician didn't really do it. And I had to kind of grow into this, what was meant by the term magician. But here are some of the archetypes. Merlin as a magician. The three magi who are part of the story of Christ in the Bible. The shamanic tradition. That the magician tradition has to do with accessing higher realms, including higher mind realms and the use of the mind in really all its forms. So on our third class, this is what we're going to be really getting into, the magician energy, the magician aspect of the masculine, which includes the mind aspect. Big, big topic. Then there's the lover. And the lover includes the lover as, relationship, the lover as sexual union. So it includes the man-woman dynamic in all its forms, but it also is bigger than that. It includes like male sensitivity, masculine sensitivity, masculine opening up to art, such as music. Music is a big way for many men that they connect with lover energy, of sensuality, of, experiencing connection to feeling and something that moves them. Or nature is a whole nother one. So on our fourth class, we'll be looking at the lover archetype and how that plays into creating the gestalt, the wholeness of the masculine. And then we have the king. And these are some of the images of the king archetype. This is the Egyptian, the pharaoh, the king energy and archetype from the East. This is actually a painting of King Solomon and the more Western orientation. So, I think that's King Solomon in this painting. But I like it very much because to me it's more the Western image of the traditional kind of king figure. This is Augustus Caesar, I believe. The Roman, energy of the king, and various different images, and how the king lives in us as individuals and in our culture, and what is sacred kingship. So we'll be looking at that the 5th week. And then we'll be putting this all together in terms of, okay, what does this mean for sacred masculine, for moving into the 4th dimension, the way that Mary Magdalene and Yeshua are really guiding us to in the communications that I'm receiving from them. And so how do we put this together and do this whole dance in terms of spiritual growth, spiritual evolution, human evolution? And that's what we'll be looking at finally in our last week. And so what came out of it, all this for me, was this sense that all of these are aspects of the masculine, the warrior, the magician, the lover, the king, that they're all important and that they all have a continuum to them, and a continuum from what we might call, you know, lower forms or more third dimensional forms, more instinctual forms that we gravitate to, you know, just instinctively. And there's a whole progression or spectrum of going into what you might call higher forms. And I don't mean higher in terms of better, worse. I mean it in terms of frequency, that we're moving into a frequency that's a higher frequency, literally. And our next level of it is the 4th dimension. And so what are the higher frequencies of each of these archetypes? And how can we manifest those within ourselves and in our world? So that's where we're headed on this journey together and what we'll be looking at. And the last thing I want to say about this is, I believe, and what I came to through my research, is that Yeshua is a master archetype, what I would call a master archetype. And for me, he has represented each of these individually, each of these different qualities of the masculine in a very high form, in a very high frequency. And that's part of what the lens that we're going to be exploring in each of these course meetings, where we're looking at these various archetypes. And we will be looking at Yeshua as a model. How did he represent and integrate these various archetypes in what we have learned and understand or have heard relative to him? So using Yeshua as a model, as a teacher, and also as an archetype in and of himself. So that's where we're headed. And I was hoping in this class that we were going to have time to talk very specifically about the last area relative to specifically the masculine and masculine spirituality, which has to do with initiation and male initiation. And I'm not sure we're going to get there today. So we might start with that next time, because I don't want to cut it short. There's so much richness to it. And I really want to, you know, be full in our consideration relative to that. So I think what we'll do is we'll start with that next time. And this is something that is another thing that I uncovered in my research. That's a whole unique area to at least our history with the masculine, is this idea and this practice of male initiation and what that means. So that's the picture of where we're headed on our journey here. And I would love to open up to anything that comes up for you, any thoughts, feelings about all of this that you'd like to share at this time.
I'm glad I joined the webinar, and I feel already it's bringing that genuine masculine to the forefront without taking anything from the feminine.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed going through the discussions today and the guided content, particularly understanding that there's, you know, 4 very frequent and popular archetypes, because I can see aspects of my own self represented in all 4 of those. Particularly the magician, I really do, you know, associate with that. You know, from there, and you were wondering, you know, why that seems to be a popular archetype. For me, it's probably just as much the creative aspect as it is having the creativity from the lover side. It is being able to have that channel of intuition and opening up to that, to, you know, divine energy and that 4th dimensional connection. So that's really where I personally feel, you know, a lot of opportunity for growth, as well as being the lover as well. But understanding those 4 really do, you know, resound in me. And I would love to see how that is mirrored against, you know, the popular female archetypes. You know, just to find out, like, you know, obviously, you know, there's going to be lover for female as well, and similar, you know, queen and things like that. I would like to see kind of a lineup of that. But I really enjoyed the discussion today. Thank you, Mercedes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And, you know, I'd just like to share a little bit personally from my story here. Part of my journey has been to learn about these aspects of the masculine that, like I say, just weren't on my radar. And the magician energy, I would say, is one of them. And then I went deeper and thought, why isn't it on my radar? Is there something in me that's blocking this? And that's where a lot of my growth came out of. And the magician energy has a lot to do with the mind. And I think part of my personal path has been my pain around my own sense of being suppressed in the feminine. And that's had to do with living in a world that's very mind-oriented and that was not as supportive as I have needed in my life of the feminine counterpart of feeling and being feeling-oriented. And I think for me, I have defended myself and maybe tried to support myself in a certain way by blocking out that mind orientation and making it wrong. And this is part of that, you know, bias, making the masculine wrong, that I was so frustrated with being so many messages coming to me of, you know, be in your mind, be in your mind, be in your mind. If you want to succeed in the world, if you want to survive in the world, if you want to do anything in the world, you know, you have to be strong in your mind. This world is very mind-based. For someone who's very feeling-based, I have experienced it as difficult for myself to be in an environment that's so focused on the mind. And so I think I have come into I have had my reaction to that. And my reaction to that is to try to tune out the mind, tune out that approach so that I could find my own strength, my own kind of support. And I think part of that is just sort of like, so for me, the mind realm, that's nothing. It's always in the way, it's the problem. If only all these men weren't in their mind all the time, everything would be fine. And so I think my not relating to the magician had this whole, you know, it was covering up a lot of wounding in me, a lot of pain. And so I experienced a lot of healing relative to that. And when I healed, I started to fall in love with the masculine and the masculine's connection to the mind, and to see it as beautiful and amazing and powerful. And I also, there was a part of me that was going, wow, you've never experienced this before. And I specifically felt it in relationship to men, that I'm so grateful to men for being so strong in their mind and having this amazing capacity. And of course, I have to balance that saying not only men can be strong in their mind, women too. And I actually have a very strong mind myself. But there was a part of me that was in rebellion that has really changed through this work specifically. And I feel so enriched by that. I feel so in love with the masculine in a new way, including the beautiful mental aspect of the masculine that I have blocked for much of my life.
If I may say something, please. When you mentioned originally about the magician, to me it was alchemy.
Yes.
To me was the word alchemy was in front of my eyes, and for me, I can speak for myself. This course / webinar, whatever, the culmination of it for me is the falling in love within me of the masculine and the feminine.
Yes.
And when that occurs, this is magic, this is alchemy, this is whatever you want to say about it. It's not a completion. It's a new beginning, for another new beginning, for another world, for another universe.
Yes.
Within me.
Yes. Yes. And what I want to say about that is, to me, that speaks greatly to the lover archetype, which we will be getting to.
Yes. Yes.
And also, if we go back to Mary Magdalene Beckens, those 3 phases she talked about of uniting the masculine and feminine, of balance, harmony, and then union, to me, that lover energy has everything to do with moving from that first phase of balance to the second one of harmony.
Yes.
Where the masculine and feminine fall in love with each other.
Yes.
And that's what I'm really looking forward to.
Within.
Absolutely. That's where it starts. Always.
Yes.
Where all the battles are to be fought.
And that will flow to the outer.
Exactly. That will create the outer, which is our magician energy.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this material so much. Well, we are at the end of our time, and I just thank everyone so much for your sharing. This has been so enriching. I just want to add, relative to, on the heels of what you just shared, Musa, that part of what I really want to encourage people to do is to contemplate other names that speak to you. Like you said, alchemy. I really think there's power in words. And part of the power of empowering our own masculine and the masculine for all of us is coming up with those words that really speak to us. So I want to encourage everyone to think about, what are the words that really speak to me, and to share that with the group. We're not going to do it now because we're out of time, but throughout the rest of the course. And also, as archetypes come up to you, and Chris, you mentioned an archetype that came up for you earlier, and I'm spacing out right now on the name. I can see it and I can't think of the name. Help me out. What was the archetype that you came up with? Do you remember when we were talking about the masculine?
Which one?
When we were talking about the masculine early on?
Yeah.
And
well, there was the Buddha.
There's another name that you used.
Siddhartha.
Siddhartha, thank you. That's what I'm thinking of. So yes, as these things come up through this course, the images, the archetypes that might be strong for you, stories that aren't being mentioned, please bring them forth and and names, new names, because part of what as we move into the 4D version, it might help us to have new names, to rename these qualities in ways that speak more to the higher frequency that we really want to be bringing in and strengthening. So I encourage all of us to be thinking about that and to share it as it comes up. So with that, we're out of time for today. I'm sad. I have so much more I want to share about this, but we'll wait till next week. I will be giving you a study guide for the week, so you'll be getting that. And then there will also be a recording of our course today. And if in the future you can't make any of the courses or you just want to listen to it again, that will be available. So I'll be sending you a link to that page. So thank you all so much. I invite you all to unmute yourself and we'll share a goodbye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.